I can smile, and murder whiles I smile. Henry VI, Part 3, 1591. King's Dramatae. The King's Party. King Henry VI, Queen Margaret, Prince Edward, Lord Clifford, House of Neville, Earl of Warwick. Duke of York's Party. Richard, Duke of York, Edward, later King Edward IV, Lady Grey, George Plantagenet, Duke of Clarence later on, and then Richard Plantagenet, York's son, later Duke of Gloucester, Earl of Rutland, also York's son. The French, King Louis, Lady Bona. After the Yorkist victory at St. Alban, Henry VI is forced to make a pledge. He will remain king, but Richard of York will become king after his death. York agrees to this, but his son Richard persuades him to break the oath. War breaks out, and Clifford murders York's son Rutland. After the Battle of Wakefield, York is cornered, and Queen Margaret and Clifford taunt him with Rutland's blood before killing him. York's sons Edward, Richard, and George plan their revenge and are joined, crucially, by Warwick. Margaret and Clifford, confronted by the rampant York brothers, try to rouse Henry to fight. In the Battle of Towton, Warwick saves Richard from Clifford. Henry laments the tragedy of civil war. Clifford is killed. The Yorkists are victorious, and Edward is crowned King Edward IV. Henry is captured. In London, Edward IV blackmails Lady Grey into a marriage. Richard, now Duke of Gloucester, railing against his deformities, reveals his ambition to be king. Meanwhile, Henry has been sent to the Tower of London and learns that Warwick is arranging a wedding between Edward and Louis's sister, Lady Bona. Just as Louis agrees to the wedding, news arrives of Edward's marriage to Lady Grey. Warwick disavows Edward and joins with Margaret. In England, Edward learns that his brother George, now Duke of Clarence, has joined Warwick and the Lancastrian forces. Warwick raids Edward's camp, takes the crown from Edward, and makes him a prisoner. Henry VI, restored to power, makes Warwick and Clarence his protectors, but Edward, with the help of Gloucester, escapes. At the head of his foreign army, Edward is victorious and reclaims the throne, imprisoning Henry in the Tower. The Yorkists capture Coventry, and Clarence rejoins his brothers. Warwick flees but is killed. Queen Margaret leads an army against the Yorkists but is defeated and taken prisoner. Edward IV, Gloucester, and Clarence kill her young son Edward but refuse to kill Margaret. In the Tower, Henry taunts the deformed Gloucester, who kills him and vows to kill his brothers. Edward IV and his queen have a new baby, but Gloucester is already plotting. In context, themes: kingship, revenge, betrayal, civil war, battles. Setting: London, Yorkshire, Warwickshire, and various towns around England. Sources: 1513, Thomas More's History of King Richard III. 1545, Edward Hall's union of the two noble and illustrious families of Lancaster and York, a biased Tudor-friendly account of the events covered in the play. 1587, Raphael Holinshed's Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland. Legacy: 1592, playwright Robert Greene makes a reference to the play to express his contempt for Shakespeare. This indicates that the play had been performed, although no records survive. 1595, the play is first published with the title The True Tragedy of Richard, Duke of York, and the Death of King Henry VI, with the whole contention of the two houses, Lancaster and York. 1681, Thomas Crown stages an adaptation of the play called The Misery of Civil Wars. If I'm right. Civil War. 1977, at the Swan Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon, Helen Mirren plays an acclaimed Margaret as the play receives a rare, almost uncut treatment. Henry VI, Part 3 is the last of Shakespeare's three plays about the reign of Henry VI, 1422-61 and 1470-71. It covers the bloodiest period of the Wars of the Roses, in which the Yorkist faction gained ascendancy over Henry's Lancastrians in battle for the throne, and the eldest of the Duke of York's sons snatched the crown from Henry to become Edward IV. It ends with the murder of Henry in the Tower of London in 1471 by another son of York, Richard of Gloucester, later Richard III. Henry VI Part 3 was performed first in about 1591. England was racked by the violent aftermath of Henry VIII's break from Rome, and Elizabeth I holding the throne was still under threat. The depiction of leaders cynically playing for power would have struck a chord with audiences. The Yorkists Edward and Richard are portrayed in a very poor light, while the Earl of Richmond, later Henry VII, and Elizabeth's grandfather, is praised. My crown is in my heart, not on my head, not decked with diamonds and Indian stones. Henry VI, Act 3, Scene 1. In this vicious world, the weak but well-intentioned Henry is entirely lost. While he is banned from the Battle of Towton, he meekly agrees, admitting with unwitting irony, "They prosper best of all when I am thence." Act 2, Scene 5, line 28. But his abdication of responsibility turns him like the audience in an appalled spectator watching the tragedy unfold. As he sits away from the battle on the molehill to which his kingdom has shrunk, though he witnesses the real horror of civil war in the affecting tableau of a soldier who has killed his son and another who has killed his father. And let our hearts and eyes, like civil war, be blind with tears and break, or charged with grief. Act 2, Scene 5, lines 77-78. But there is self-indulgence too when he sighs, "Here sits a king more woeful than you are." Act 2, Scene 5, line 124. Henry's absence allows two characters to dominate the action: Richard, Duke of Gloucester, and Queen Margaret. Both are seen as monstrous freaks of nature that have thrived in the absence of normal moral values. Richard is physically deformed at birth with his crook back and shriveled arm, and Margaret unnaturally manly. Why, what is pomp, roll, reign, but earth and dust? And yet live we how we can, yet die we must. Earl of Warwick, Act 5, Scene 2. A tiger's heart. As Margaret stands exultant over Richard of York, handing him a handkerchief soaked in his son's blood, he describes her famously as the she-wolf of France. Act 1, Scene 4, line 112. A tiger's heart wrapped in a woman's hide. Act 1, Scene 4, line 138. She is an Amazon who does not behave as women should. Soft, mild, pitiful, and flexible. Act 1, Scene 4, line 142. In Shakespeare's play, she seems to represent a world turned upside down. While enemies describe Margaret in disparaging terms, her strength inspires great loyalty among her supporters. However, when her own son is killed, she responds with tender motherly outrage. "Oh, Ned, sweet Ned, speak to thy mother, boy." "No, no, my heart will burst, and if I speak up, and I will speak so that my heart may burst. You have no children, Birches, if you had. The thought of them would have stirred up remorse." Act 5, Scene 5, line 50, 58 and 59, 62 and 63. In her exasperation at her husband's weakness, Margaret bans him from the battle, although she could also be seen as a strong woman who is protecting a childlike man. The Shapeshifter. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, will have his own play in Richard III, but his personality emerges here. In a soliloquy in Act 3, Scene 2, he explains that his character has been shaped by his physical deformity. Deprived from birth of normal love by his misshapen body, he has turned himself into a Machiavel, a political player who sets himself apart from common humanity. He is interested only in the tactics that bring the highest prize to the crown and becomes the consummate actor. "Why, I can smile and murder whiles I smile." Act 3, Scene 2, line 182. By means of this soliloquy and other asides, Shakespeare allowed audiences to join the characters on their psychological journeys. This was a new form of stage drama. Revenge in the play. Revenge drives much of the action in the energetic piece, which features no fewer than 4 battles: Wakefield, Towton, Barnet, and Tewkesbury, more than any other of Shakespeare's plays. Both the Lancastrians and the Yorkists are hungry to wreak vengeance on the other side to right various wrongs that have been committed. Clifford, in particular, is eaten up with a desire to revenge the death of his father. Margaret exults in the murder of Rutland, Richard's son, by Clifford, only to have to suffer in retaliation the murder of her son before her eyes. Richard's sons, Edward, Gloucester, and Clarence, seek to avenge his death, along with the previously loyal Warwick, who, after suffering humiliation at the French court, turns against Henry and joins his enemies. Even Gloucester's ambitions for the crown appear to be an urge to even the score for the unkind treatment he received as a boy. Near the end of the play, when he kisses King Edward's baby, he whispers the ominous "So Judas kissed his master," Act 5, Scene 7, line 33, promising more betrayal and vengeance to come.